Inviterei adesso il nostro secondo relatore, so we're going to switch to the next speaker, John, if you'd like. John Himoff is the CEO of Resable. Resable is an English company. John is an experienced IT engineer with a very deep knowledge of 3D virtual worlds. He believes that web-based virtual worlds are the beginning of a very exciting direction towards the 3D web, where a new type of interaction with information, content, and people will be possible. And the avatar will be the essential interface or guide or companion for this dynamic new environment. Sort of new Virgilio, which will take us around. So, John.
Thank you very much. So I wanted to talk about fun, actually, and why that's important, and looking at in the domain of the actual, and I'm not even sure what to call it anymore, digital education games. The span of what's possible now is quite broad, and virtual worlds, I think, just one of the pieces of it. So let me just get going here. So I guess the first question is, why is fun important? And I think probably most kids would say that they don't have enough fun at school, even though they look like they have too much fun when you compare them to the working life. But I think fun is an important element, mainly because there are a lot of things competing for children's attention, their students' attention. And how do you actually get their attention and get them to really focus in on what's being taught to them? And that's, of course, just the beginning. It just gets harder after that, because you have to maintain their interest and really pull them into something that they invest time and effort into, and they see some reward coming out of it. I think importantly also that students, when they're having fun, are actually more open to new ideas than if they're not having fun. So there's a sort of motivation around this as well. But I'd also like to point out that fun is not the objective. We're not making games for the sake of a game. And in fact, I can think that some games take a very cynical view, and most games are not meant to be fun, they're meant to be addictive. So that's also something to keep in mind when designing these things. But fun is a key part of the design and the overall process of how they interact with these types of educational games. So this clipped off a little bit. The top of it says, what is fun? So I try to put a few points around what fun looks like. And it's changing quite a bit as younger people are more familiar with web-based experiences than they are with television-based experiences or even reading books. So the pace with which they consume content and consume activities is very quick. So YouTube, as an example, kids will zap across a lot of different YouTube content instead of sitting in front of one TV channel and watching a show for half an hour. It seems like a very long time for kids. 3D is a very important part of this as well. I think the web is delivering a lot more rich content. In the education environment, a lot of the content is still very flat and very kind of black and white oriented, mainly as a function of some of the resources the teachers have, but also books by definition are very flat and not very engaging. But kids are being thrown at a lot of very rich 3D content that's very active. So many movies now, and also becoming on TV, 3D content. So to really get their attention, 3D is a very important way of defining something as new and innovative, actually put out 3D content. Fun is also about something that's relatively easy to use. I think certainly in the START project, one of the frustrations we had was not so much the using of the project, but the getting them started was very painful. And I think we have to really address that and make the early experiences with these games very quick and very easy to use. You can increase the complexity, but you can't have the complexity in front. And I think that's an important consideration. I think also humor is very important. I think a lot of the educational content is painfully self-important and could benefit from having a level of humor wound into it. in a way that the kids are ready and the students would appreciate, and that would also be more engaging for them. And then the last point I have on this slide is this concept of achievement, where as you're having fun and you're consuming content involved in activities, that you're achieving something, that there is some progress. I think kids are also very goal-oriented, and if you give them some type of objective, they actually will focus, and that will help them make progress. So that's one definition of fun. This is a little green man, and he's standing in front of a computer screen, and he's having fun, so why shouldn't we? Funny pictures, some very abstract, but also a funny an Escher diagram here. The next thing to think about are a lot of devices that are out and available certainly over the next few years when we're looking at this project. Browsers, of course, any number of browsers able to open up on any number of computers and just work, which is great. A lot of the schools have deployed whiteboards, so there's an infrastructure for teachers to actually use these devices. Smartphones, and probably more importantly for the schools, are the tablets that are just being bought very quickly and distributed across schools, across Europe, across the world. And even beyond that, there are new types of hardware devices. There's not even a category to call these things. This one device on this slide is a bracelet actually you put around your hand. And one of the early uses of it is to track how well you sleep at night. And it collects data within the device, and then it downloads it to your iPhone. And it'll help you, it'll actually set off your alarm on your phone. So it tries to figure out when your sleeping cycles are and wake you up in a most natural state, so you wake up refreshed rather than tired. So there are some, and I don't think it's a very expensive device, but there are a lot of devices that are very simple that you wear, or personal devices that connect into all these other devices, which could also be fun and interesting and innovative to work with. Okay, so I wanted to make a kind of an ingredient list for what 3D interactive, if you're in the kitchen making a 3D interactive project, what types of ingredients do you have available? And really the question is, how do you want to mix them up? But I thought it would be useful just to actually go through each one of these and talk about them for a minute. So there's something about the context or the backstory of what the content framework is actually sitting about. This could be a very simple story about the Wild West. It could be a story about the European Union in Brussels or something, but something that allows the styling and design of the overall presentation of the content. So there's some level of consistency and some level of visual metaphors that are being used, or there's some logic to how the experience is consumed. And actually this does take a little bit of time in the front end to figure out. Even if you don't use all the elements in the project, actually designing how it all comes together as the first step is very important, because then the whole rest of the project has a lot more consistency to it. Within a 3D environment, there's this concept of placeness. These are not real places, they're synthetic, they only exist when you're using them. But actually, the more you use something, you get to know the idea that something is in front of something, is next to something, is behind something, is north of something. It all becomes very interesting. And the actual areas can be built in various levels of detail, from simple to very complicated. There are characters in these worlds, and the characters can either be your character, so your avatar, or they could be characters that exist in places. We refer to them as NPCs, or non-player characters. And these characters can have some type of logic, they can have artificial intelligence, they can have some script, they can participate in activities to provide tips or helps. They can do quite a bit to actually move the narrative along in the stories. Then there are the activities, which in general are the main sense of why you make all this stuff. And the activities kind of fall into three main areas. You have the linear story, or the linear process you want to move somebody through. You have a mini game, which exists as kind of an app in a way. Think of it as sort of an app within the story. And that could be around practicing something, or learning something, or having just kind of using some knowledge you may already have. And then the final piece is what we think of as exploration, or perhaps surprise or random content. So it's not something you have to do in a particular order. It's just something you stumble onto, or as part of some competition, door opens and you find something that wasn't prescribed for you to find. So it could be nonlinear, but we tend to think of the content more as a knowledge network rather than a path. So these are just ways to lead you into different nodes of information. An achievement system, very important. Again, I think students are extremely goal-oriented. I find it kind of funny as educators to hear everyone talk about how the students are deficient, but then you realize the students get very nervous about this and they want to be more successful, so they become very goal-oriented. And actually, maybe there's some problem that the goal of doing better on the test isn't really the goal of education, and it becomes somewhat at odds with itself. But certainly the students react to a type of achievement. They want to gain points, they want to earn badges, and they want to have some type of resource that they can spend or share or develop some kind of status even is very important. Customization is a very critical piece. Even if it's a very simple layer where you're changing the color of a shirt, it gives the user some sense that they're impacting the environment. If you think about the kind of something that's not 3D or interactive, it would be a video you would watch. You don't have any chance to change that. It just goes and it finishes and ends. You can stop it. That's about as interactive as you're going to get with a video. But within a game environment, you can change quite a bit. You can adjust various features. You can change and personalize things. And this becomes an important step because as the users customize something, they're making an investment in actually continuing on with that experience. User-generated content is, I think, much more complicated than customization, and it creates an enormous, enormous level of complexity within the actual system and application. So it's a question of, is it really useful or not? Is there a way to balance customization or some type of pre-created content that the users can access rather than have a full-blown user-generated content system, which increases the complexity both of the user experience but also for the teachers and for the administrators and for the overall system. So that becomes an interesting question, is that worth it or not? Underneath the entire system, you can also collect a lot of data as the activities are performed, or as you move through a space, you can create some type of gate. Every time someone passes a gate, you can collect information about it. You can also ask them questions. You can get feedback within the game. Is this interesting? Do you like it? Would you like more of this, less of this? So some kind of running diagnostic is also an interesting point. And then finally on my, this is my short list, there's a much longer list attached to this. My final point on this list was the idea of web social, which is in some way exposing the activity to a broader community, certainly to friends, family, but to actually use the web social as a way to drive interest and to share achievement, it becomes very interesting. I think I thought it was interesting that presentation you showed earlier. It said MySpace had 100 million users. Facebook has 800 million users, and MySpace is gone already. That's even faster how things change. But Facebook, which is really only open to people who are over 18, that's in their terms of service, has a huge population of children from the age of, I can't even imagine, age of 10 probably, all the way up from there. So I think that is an important thing, and a lot of the game technology that we're working with now, you can very easily take results out of a game and even dynamically post it to Facebook or Twitter or to, I think probably more interestingly, to a system that would be within a classroom. So you can see an activity stream of things happening. So it's kind of cool. There's a lot, it's a very visual world as well, so I think that's important to realize that when the students look at this stuff, they're visually immediately engaged because it's rich, it's deep. When you think of looking at a picture, you're looking at one frame. When you're looking at a movie, you're looking at 24 frames per second. When you look at a 3D environment, you're getting 24 frames per second plus the depth and the interaction of moving around that space. So mentally, it's a much more dynamic process that it requires more attention, but then also it's a way to pull them in the first place. And you can be abstract and do kind of weird stuff. So the constraint of the real world is perhaps relevant or not. You're not necessarily bound to it. You can reinvent everything. We showed the STAR project earlier. This is just the URL. I don't know if people saw that. But if you go onto that site, you can go and have a look at the virtual world project that we did. There are a lot of movies there as well, which are perhaps interesting. Okay, so now that we have a game, so now the question is, what's the approach to bringing it into the classroom? So I think we have to be realistic that the pace and the patience for the students is changing. So the idea of giving them smaller bites that are very intense, and it is worth noting that a lot of these 3D interactive games are very intense experiences. So it's not the kind of thing you would want to do for a long period of time. It can be very draining and can really give you a headache. So having small, intense moments is very good. Repeating stuff is also very good. You can repeat activities directly or with some small variation. Heuristics, this is part of problem solving, I suppose. Trial and error, so maybe not being so worried about providing detailed explanation of how to do something, but just kind of posing the problem and giving some loose idea how the problem might be solved. That's an approach where students are very interested now in actually solving the problems. They don't want to read instructions. They just want to move right on to it and try to poke at something and try to break it. The idea that the individuals can then run at their own pace, I think, is very good. I think that only works if they're ultimately headed towards a destination. I think it's problematic if you say, hey, work at your own pace. The kid's like, okay, never is my pace. And then they tune out and you lose them completely. So allowing them to be stimulated and to go down a path that's self-regulating, I think, is interesting. And there's a lot of technology that's available now to do that. Teamwork and collaboration, also very important. I think, and I think, again, the movie that you showed, very interesting. In the future, there will be more teamwork and collaboration. And a lot of the processes in school are very individually oriented about how well did you do, what kind of skills do you have. But the softer social skills, how well do you work together, much more difficult to measure, much more difficult to teach. So maybe there's a chance to use these kind of tools for that. And then finally, competition. And the competition can be very broad now because of the web. It could be within a class, within a school, or within a country, within all of Europe, to let people compete and also collaborate and compete at the same time is an interesting concept. And then how do you service to the students? What's the way to actually bring this into the day-to-day operation of the school? So I think it's fundamental to design the game as part of a course and the lesson plans. I think, and we were discussing this yesterday during our preparation for the TALETE project, the teachers don't have time to create new lesson plans. And they get very disoriented very quickly when you throw something brand new at them and say, please immediately put this into your class. They don't want to do it. They'll reject it almost immediately. So designing the lesson plan and the new content together, I think, is a really important thing to do. And of course, the teachers have a lot of time constraints, and they have existing course obligations that they have to complete. So this is something that's actually very, requires a lot of attention to getting it right. There's a level where the teacher presents stuff, which can be very one-way and very linear. But then there are also the student activities, which would be more game-oriented within the structure. And then being able to expose the results in the right way, not necessarily showing everything, but finding the right way to present results. Sometimes, we see certainly within the math area that some of the students lack confidence. So exposing bad results could actually be negative rather than positive. So understanding how to do that, I think, is very important. And then be aware that the students can access this type of online content, not just in the class or in break time or in a more structured lab, but also at home and potentially during their travel time. So the chance for them to actually interact with something is significantly greater than just the hours of the classroom, provided they think it's fun, provided they like it, provided it's interesting. And that was my short introduction to what we're doing. On our website, we actually have 2 products now that incorporate some of this in some interesting way. We've focused our products on the domain of history, but I think the ideas are very similar, and we work through a lot of things. So if you want to have a look at our website, please go have a look or send me an email.
Thank you, John. Thanks, John. It was an interesting overview and an interesting recipe. So let me try to give an overview of that in Italian. Allora, la presentazione di John ha cercato di darci un'idea di come è possibile far diventare l'educazione digitale divertente. Innanzitutto ci ha spiegato che il divertimento è parte di quello che serve per attirare gli studenti, perché gli dà l'idea che stanno giocando ma in realtà stanno imparando, gli fa aprire la mente, con l'attenzione però che il divertimento non deve essere mai fine a se stesso, ma deve essere parte comunque di un percorso didattico. Cosa è divertente per gli studenti di oggi? Qualcosa che sia ad alta velocità, che abbia una dimensione, una tridimensionalità, che sia divertente, in cui ci siano dei risultati da raggiungere e che sia facile da usare, che non abbia grosse barriere d'ingresso. E in questo John rifletteva sulle difficoltà che abbiamo incontrato nell'ambito del progetto START, dove le difficoltà iniziali sono state quelle di far sì che le persone riuscissero ad utilizzare l'ambiente 3D. Abbiamo avuto tante difficoltà di tipo tecnico, operativo, e forse questa è anche la ragione per la quale all'inizio del progetto Avatar c'è stato quel 35% di dropout che Cristina presentava prima. Potrebbe essere essenzialmente dovuto a difficoltà di tipo proprio tecnologico. Una volta superate queste difficoltà, oggi ci sono una serie di device che ci permettono di utilizzare la tecnologia, dai browser più avanzati, in classe le LIM, le lavagne intelligenti, gli smartphone che sono ormai di uso molto diffuso, i tablet, fino ad arrivare a oggetti in cui la tecnologia fa una cosa in particolare, e ho scoperto una cosa che andrò a comprare immediatamente, che è questo device che aiuta a registrare come uno dorme. Finora avevo utilizzato solo un'applicazione sull'iPhone che registrava i miei cicli di sonno, ma ora ho scoperto che c'è qualcosa di ancora più interessante. E questo è vero un pochino in generale. Ci sono oggi tanti piccoli device, grazie al fatto che la tecnologia costa sempre di meno, che fanno delle cose ma le fanno in maniera molto intelligente. Dopodiché John ha proceduto a darci la sua ricetta per fare formazione in un ambiente 3D, innanzitutto partendo dagli ingredienti. Allora, gli ingredienti per fare questa ricetta sono 9. Prima di tutto il contesto, quindi l'ambito nel quale si va poi a creare questa storia, che va scelto opportunamente perché sia divertente, ma anche permetta poi di inserire tutti gli elementi didattici che vogliamo inserire. La parte di tridimensionalità, quindi anche la collocazione dei vari oggetti in quest'ambito, i personaggi collaterali che rendono l'ambiente più interessante, le attività che vengono svolte nell'ambiente 3D, in particolare queste attività possono essere di 3 tipi diversi: storie lineari in cui una cosa accade dopo l'altra, minigiochi, oppure situazioni invece di esplorazione in cui l'elemento sorpresa è un elemento caratterizzante, che sono non lineari, in cui c'è una vera e propria ricerca e sono delle reti di conoscenza. Poi il quinto ingrediente sono quello dei risultati che possono essere raggiunti nell'ambito di questo mondo, e quindi ai ragazzi piace raccogliere dei punti, raccogliere dei soldi virtuali che gli permettano di fare qualche cosa, oppure raggiungere un riconoscimento, soprattutto se questo riconoscimento può essere in qualche maniera esposto agli altri, reso noto agli altri. L'adattamento è il sesto ingrediente, cioè la possibilità di adattare o personalizzarsi l'ambiente, dalla scelta di cosa veste il proprio avatar fino a cambiare radicalmente anche l'ambiente nel quale ci si muove. Il settimo ingrediente sono i contenuti, e soprattutto contenuti in parte generati dagli utenti stessi, il che semplifica la realizzazione di queste soluzioni da una parte, ma le rende ancora più personalizzate su misura per chi le utilizza. La raccolta di dati su tutto quello che avviene in questo mondo, e infine tutta quella parte di socializzazione che fa sì che l'esperienza che il singolo vive in questo ambiente possa essere condivisa con altri attraverso social media, social network, eccetera. Il mondo che viene creato in questo modo è sicuramente un mondo molto interessante, in cui l'approccio è un approccio che ha delle caratteristiche ben precise, è un approccio dove tipicamente si lavora per piccoli assaggi, piccole esperienze molto intense, in cui spesso c'è una attività ripetitiva, ci sono delle cose che vengono fatte e rifatte, c'è un approccio euristico in cui lo studente piuttosto che avere delle istruzioni molto precise va ed esplora il mondo e ne scopre il funzionamento, e parte di questo approccio è quello che lo rende questo approccio interessante. La possibilità dello studente di procedere alla propria velocità e quindi non essere vincolato da ritmi predefiniti, ma comunque con un traguardo da raggiungere, quindi senza il rischio poi che questa propria velocità si traduca nel fatto che a un certo punto si perde o si ferma. La collaborazione in cui le attività devono essere svolte insieme ad altri, attività che poi nella vita gli servirà e che oggi nella scuola è un po' più difficile da apprendere per il modo in cui viene fatto l'insegnamento. E la competizione, il concorrere con altre persone, e grazie alla tecnologia non solo all'interno della stessa classe, ma con altre classi, con altre scuole, con studenti di tutta Europa o tutto il mondo teoricamente. Come dare tutto questo agli studenti? Può essere dato e confezionato in modi opportuni che rendano questo strumento facile da utilizzare per gli insegnanti. Dobbiamo sempre tener conto che l'insegnante è anche costretto a rispettare i programmi ministeriali, è costretto a inserire tutto questo in ambiti che spesso non sono molto flessibili. Quindi riuscire a darglielo in una confezione che renda più semplice l'inserimento in un corso, che sia già corredato di piani di lezione, piani didattici per la messa in atto, che includa delle parti in cui il docente può fare una classica presentazione, diciamo, in cui è lui che trasmette agli studenti qualche cosa, ma che includa già anche poi delle successive attività che lo studente può fare, un modo per far vedere e rendere evidenti i risultati raggiunti, è un modo per condividere questi risultati. Abbiamo detto quanto la socializzazione sia importante, e infine la possibilità di utilizzare questo mondo non solamente in classe ma anche a casa. Questo rende l'ambiente ancora più interessante e stimolante per gli studenti. John ha fatto vedere un po' di link e di come queste cose le stiano facendo non solo nell'ambito di questo progetto di ricerca, ma anche nell'ambito dei prodotti realizzati da Redsable. Vi invito ad andarli a guardare, ci sono alcune cose che sono veramente molto, molto belle. Grazie John. Thanks John.
Okay.